I am Dr. Jennifer Weeks. I am the founder and director of Sexual Addiction Treatment Services. I am a certified sex addiction therapist and a state certified addiction therapist. What I am working on in terms of a side project from the clinical practice is authoring the book called The New Age of Sex Education: How Do You Talk to Your Teens About Cybersex and Pornography. This is a book that has grown out of my work with my clients over the past 9 years, exclusively working in sex addiction. When I work with individuals, I always ask how they learned about sex. What did their parents teach them about sex? How did they learn about pornography or other things around sexuality? And for most of my clients, the answer is they didn't. I have a PhD in psychology. Originally I was an academic, so I taught psychology, biology, and women's studies at the college level. About 11 years ago, I made a switch from academia into clinical work. I started working with addiction, mostly substance addiction, domestic violence, and sex offenders. And approximately 9 years ago, my practice streamlined into being primarily purely sex addiction work. The main goal of the book is really as an education tool for parents. It is part about educating parents what their children are doing in the digital world when it comes to sexuality, whether that be pornography, sexting, messaging apps, things of that nature. Another goal is to educate parents about what cybersexuality does to developing children. A main piece I also wanted to touch on in writing this was about the parents themselves. So education is a great thing, but I can have all the information in the world, and if I can't communicate that to my children, it doesn't help us at all. And what I found in my work is that a lot of parents have their own stuff around sexuality, whether they have their own discomfort or shame or embarrassment, or they have a really hard time talking about sex and sexuality to their children. So if we don't work through that first, we can have all the information in the world and we're never going to talk to our kids about it anyway because we're embarrassed or we're ashamed. My generation, we passed notes, we had phone calls. This generation, they text, they sext, and a lot of this has become part of their normative culture. So a piece of this is helping parents come to understand that. The final little piece at the end of the book is to help parents and children come to an understanding of what this would look like if it was a problem. If my child does have a problem with online pornography, what might that look like, and if they do, what kind of resources are there to help them? Every book agent that I pitched this to loved the concept. They loved the idea, they loved the beginning of the book that they were given, they thought it was fabulous, they thought it was timely, they thought it was needed, and they thought absolutely no publisher was willing to touch it because it was too risky of a topic. They thought no parent is going to want to buy or walk around with a book that talks about teen sexuality. So they're kind of in a way perpetuating the shame and the secrets. We don't want to touch that, it's a little too scary, it's a little too risky, it's about teens and sex, which is why we need to talk about the book. 10, 15, 20 years ago, exposure to pornography didn't have the same kind of consequences that it has today. There's a lot more risk involved in terms of not talking to your teens about sexuality, and particularly digital sexuality. Everybody's probably seen something on the news about the sexting, there's sexting scandals, all kinds of things that can happen, and what occurs now in the digital sexual age that didn't occur in my generation is that there's a lot of potential legal consequences and social consequences. A book like The New Age of Sex Education could help because it would give the parents a frame of reference about what's going on with their kids, about the new norms around culture and the digital use of sexuality for adolescents, and it really would have given them a framework to talk to each other about it. The parents struggled. They had their own discomfort around sex and sexuality. It was take the child to a specialist, see what's going on, and they come in and, we have an appointment and everything's great, but there's nothing problematic with the child. But to be able to have that dialogue could have prevented, a trip to the therapist and all the stigma that might go along with that, or we're having this big discussion about sex or sexuality and there must be something wrong with me. which could be the message that the child gets because I'm going to the therapist, when really what could have prevented all of this was just a really open, honest discussion between the child and the parents about pornography in general and what goes on online pornography and what would make it problematic versus what makes it sort of normal social adolescent development. Would like to thank everybody for first checking us out and watching this video about the new age of sex education. I know it's a risky topic, so bravo for clicking on it and taking a peek at what we're talking about. I really want to say that parents are critical in this process. In the world that I work in around the sex addiction and the sexuality issues, the problems all arise from shame and secrets. So if parents can get educated and can talk to their children, we can alleviate the shame, we can alleviate the secrets about sexuality, and by parents coming and listening to things like this or buying the book and getting their education, we can really help foster a generation of children, of teens, of adolescents that are healthier about their sexuality, and the ultimate goal is to keep them out of my office.